British English versus American English. Which one is taught in schools? So we can obviously understand each other. There's a lot of differences with what we call certain things or the way we pronounce or spell certain words. It actually can get pretty confusing at times if you don't have any exposure to British English and you are from the US. Obviously in the US we teach American English, but also in Mexico and most of Latin America. So again, this would mean in the classroom they'd be teaching words to use like we use in the US, like aluminum, not aluminium, oil, not petrol. I do see one outlier here, and that is the island of Jamaica. And that is obviously because Jamaica was a British colony for a very long time. But what's interesting is the nation of Belize was as well, but they're apparently teaching American English over here. Canada obviously still has a very close connection to the British, so yes, they're teaching British English. I bet you it's a little bit of both though, to be honest. I mean, to be fair, the Canadians speak their own type of English up there. A boot. Oh, that's right, they also love pop for soda. What I'm curious about is Argentina. Why is Argentina using British English? Does it have something to do with the Falkland Islands? This is how Argentina plans to retake those islands. Obviously in all of Europe, they're teaching British English, and you can really see this as an American when you're walking around Europe as an American. For instance, if you're on the metro, they'll have like an automated voice with a British accent using British words. That makes sense to me. Like their proximity to the British Isles, that's the English that they're going to prefer. The thing is, in terms of the map, British English is just killing us. Like we couldn't even get our giant neighbor Canada to speak American English. We did somehow get Saudi Arabia on our side, and then also Israel, it looks. And a lot of this has to do with history, so a lot of these parts of Africa were a part of the British Empire. Interesting that in Thailand, a country that was never colonized, they're choosing to speak British English. Maybe to be like their southern neighbor Malaysia here. Also definitely Singapore. Indonesia, a country colonized by the Netherlands, they're teaching American English. And then historically speaking, this part of the world's connection to America, Japan, South Korea, the Philippines, Taiwan, Vietnam, American English, I'm not surprised by that. They're teaching British English in North Korea though. Australians learn Australian English, though it's closer to British English than it is to American English. In Dutch secondary schools, you choose either one as long as you are consistent. The China part is wrong. Officially, we're taught American English in school, but in reality, it's a mix of both. I bet you that's the case for a lot of these countries. By the book, they probably try to teach British English, but when it actually comes down to it, a whole lot of American things probably slip in. That's like taking a Spanish class here in the US. The book will always prefer to teach you Spanish from Spain, but in reality, it's always just Mexican Spanish or Spanish from the Caribbean if you're in Florida or the Northeast. The Great Language Race. Starting from the year 5000 BC and making it all the way to the modern day, these are all the different variations of different languages that have spread out around the world. So start with a familiar one, Italic, starting around 2000 BC, branching off and these two dying. Then Latin exploding with the rise of Rome. It's funny how often language is directly associated with empires, geopolitics of the time. From Latin, it goes to Vulgar Latin, and a lot of us know this story. That branches off to Romanian, French, Spanish, Italian, Sicilian. There's a whole lot. Portuguese. Forget about Venetian and Sardinian. Look how simple the Hellenic language was, though. It starts off as that at 2000 BC. Alexander the Great. A couple of languages die, and then boom, there's Greek right there. There's Celtic here, and with the way they branched out, wow, Pictish got pretty close to the modern day, but only recently. Well, that one just recently died off. Here's the Baltic Slavic languages that started about 2000 BC, branching off to the Baltic direction, and then the Slavic. So if we head up to the Baltic, I mean, this is going to, was it really that direct, straight to Latvian? Prussian's gone, Crimean Gothic. Here's that migration period, and as the Slavic languages turn into Russian, Ukrainian, Bulgarian, Serbian, Croatian, Slovak, Polish. Very interesting family here. Here are the Germanic languages of the 2000 BC times. That goes into Old Norse. Oh, Viking expansion. And there's English. That's how they have English labeled. From Germanic to kind of Old Norse. No, this is directly from Germanic, just leading into English. I don't really know if this infographic really takes into account like language proximity as well. Like this acts like, I mean, maybe the direct evolution is there, but modern English was really shaped by a lot of French, a lot of Spanish, Dutch, and vice versa too. I just don't like the fact that like it doesn't take geography and proximity into account at all. I mean, I just don't want people to think that it just came from this stuff exactly. Well, there's a lot of languages that I have not seen. Sumer language. The native names of Norwegian, Swedish, Flemish, and Dutch are mixed up, but very interesting graph. Why are the Indo-European languages not shown having a common ancestor? The Germanic languages are mislabeled. Very beautiful graph, but the selection of data doesn't make much sense to me. Yeah, there wasn't a whole lot of First Nation languages. That's what I was talking about. No horizontal language transfer. There's plenty of Latin in German, and English has gotten a lot of words from the French, Danish, German countries by their English proficiency. Some places are very high, others not so much. Obviously, the purple nations are native to English, so they're not going to count here. New Zealand's floating away! So Mexico is ranked low on this list. I would like to know what the qualifying factors are. So is Colombia, Panama, Ecuador, and Brazil in all of Latin America. Something I've noticed about languages in general is when a language is big enough, like when they have over hundreds of millions of speakers, they kind of live in their own world. And though it's nice to learn English, they don't really really need to because there's still just so much going on. That's definitely the case, I feel like, in Spanish, obviously in Mandarin or other Chinese dialects, the Arabic world, and I'm noticing that theme across this map. Like, for the languages that kind of rival English, you can see their English proficiency being lower. I think those people don't need English quite as much. Meanwhile, the countries that don't have as many speakers of their own native tongue, they're making a much higher priority to learn English. I mean, technically, English isn't even the most popular language when you're only considering native speakers. English only becomes the #1 language once you include second language speakers. But yeah, Mandarin Chinese, Spanish, Hindi, Bengali. That is the one giant glaring example that kind of goes against my theory here. India being moderate at English, even though they have like over 1 billion speakers or almost. But again, this example comes back to the British Empire. They were kind of forced to learn English in this part of the world. Arabic's a very popular language, so we're going to see a lot of very low proficiency. I wish they included more of the former French colonial empire, at least when it comes to the African territories. I would imagine they have low proficiency in English, but that's because they mainly choose to learn French. Damn, look how good South Africa is at English. The one outlier in the entire continent. I mean, it's obvious why, but it's still impressive to see them that dark green. Look at South Korea rank above Japan in terms of English proficiency. Interesting that Iran is ranking above Turkey. I don't think the English proficiency in Hungary is as high as in Finland. This map is wrong. Portugal always standing out. That is fascinating to see them so high in English, especially when the largest Portuguese speaker with over 200 million speakers, they don't know English that well. You'd think there'd be, yeah, there's got to be some very interesting explanations for this. Leaving Quebec as native when, in my experience, proficiency there isn't even necessarily in the very high category. Yeah, I don't know. I still stand by my theory of like when your language is big enough and you have millions and millions and millions of speakers, you kind of live in your own world. You don't need English as much. Like I'm talking at least 250 million or more speakers. The number of drownings in each US state, literally probably my top fear. I don't even want to review this right now. Yes, unfortunately, if you weren't aware, water is very dangerous, even if our body is made up of like 70% water or something like that. So obviously we have the lower 48 states, but real quick, what is going on Alaska? That is terrifying. It's probably a combination of like the fact that Alaska isn't super densely populated either. It's a whole lot of land up there and not a lot of people. I guess seeing this out of Hawaii is less surprising. Obviously, there would be a lot of this. Again, this is based off percentage, so it's not purely off population. I knew Florida would be up there, but they're only third. Then it's Louisiana. I can see that. They have a lot of coastline. What gets real crazy is to see some of these states that don't have a coastline, but yet they're pretty high. Montana and Wyoming. While both these places are very rural, I think that's kind of what it comes down to. Well, maybe not exactly, but if the more rural you are, the more accidents that probably can happen in the water, whether it's swimming pools or rivers or lakes. There's surprisingly not a whole lot of it in California, but I think because we're the state with the most population, that's what actually is driving the number down. I'm sure we have the most tragic accidents though, just because of the amount of people we have. Not too bad in the Northeast, although Maine's doing, well, Maine's got a lot of coastline. West Virginia. So unfortunately, I think a lot of this also, there's an economic factor to it. Well, there is a direct link between knowing how to swim or your economic class, basically. They've already confirmed this, unfortunately. A lot of humans didn't even, the majority of humans still don't know how to swim. I mean, I say that like it's crazy. Even I am not that strong of a swimmer. Like I could probably doggy paddle for like 2 to 5 minutes in the ocean, but after that, I don't know. And the majority of humans do not know how to swim. 55% of people report they don't know how to swim. Income disparity, gender gap. I don't really know why I can't swim better. I've been meaning to fix that. Just to clarify, it's not like if I fall into a pool, I'm definitely going to die. I'm not going to die in a pool, I think. But in the open ocean, yeah, probably. There's apparently a lot of whitewater rafting that happens in Alaska, and it's described as fast and cold. Also, a lot of Alaskans don't know how to swim well. With such great weather, 420 public beaches, plus rivers, lakes, and over 1 million swimming pools, I'm surprised California doesn't have a higher rate. It's because of our population. It drives us down. A lot of people don't even come close to the water. Home ownership rate in Europe. So I guess here in the US, if none of my generation or the generations that follow are able to buy a house, at least some of these European countries can feel our pain. I don't want us to all feel this pain, but we're in it together. Germany, the land of poets and the land of tenants. Because Germany, despite having one of the higher GDPs in the Eurozone, has by far the lowest home ownership rate. Not even 50% of the German population have a house. For comparison, apparently the US has 65% of Americans that own a house. Maybe this just has to do something with the German-speaking world. Austria also pretty low on this chart, or maybe that's to just do with like Central Europe in general. France is just barely above 60. The Netherlands, Ireland. Another thing to keep in mind too, what's in the back of my mind at least, is these houses in Europe aren't even big. A lot of times they're not even houses. They're like condos or apartment buildings, kind of apartment rooms. Home ownership is still expensive, but they're not large like they are in the US, or at least in some parts of the US. Romania is actually number 1, then Slovakia, Croatia, and Hungary. Over 90% of people own houses in these nations. That's incredible. Then Lithuania, Bulgaria, Poland, Latvia, Spain's doing pretty good job, hovering almost at 80%. A lot of these countries in Europe beating out the US if you're looking at the numbers right now. Fascinating to see it compared to GDP. Obviously, Luxembourg, people that live in Luxembourg have some of the most money on average. It's also Ireland, but their home ownership rates aren't that high at 70%. Could it be because these two countries are relatively small, especially Luxembourg, so there might not be as much real estate to buy? Renting and putting spare money you can never pay back the loan with the same amount as renting in stocks will result in more money. It might be just the way people have different philosophies about finances. And apparently this has been like this for quite some time. This is an article back from 2014. This actually shows Ireland was doing pretty good back in 2004. Good point. All the wars probably definitely had something to do with it. Obviously, you can find houses here. I can find a house down the street from me that was built in 1911. There's a much lower chance you could find a house built in 1911 in one of these countries. I mean, you still can definitely because, you know, Europe's very old, but a lot of that stuff was destroyed in World War I, World War II, any of the other resulting wars. Oh yeah, this also comes down to West Germany and East Germany thing. Rent is apparently relatively cheap too in Germany. Man, I'm just gonna have to build a house somewhere in the Sahara Desert. Build that for a whole $2-3. The island nation of Kiribati here is the only country on Earth that spans all 4 hemispheres. Obviously, we have the imaginary line of the equator, or Ecuador in Spanish, I guess, that divides the globe horizontally, then the meridian, which divides the globe vertically. They divide it perfectly in half over here in the Pacific Ocean, and that's why this island nation is actually in all 4 corners. They've got islands in the southern hemisphere, as well as islands in the north. Usually when looking at these 2 geographical lines, they show the map like this, but it does obviously wrap up and around the globe and meet again over here in this part of the Pacific Ocean. Not if you count British overseas territories. That is a very good point, or France for that matter, or the US. I guess Kiribati is the only nation, how do I phrase this? Never mind. 4 Hemi. Wow, that's, I have to say, sadly, my mind is a little blown by that. Why did I not realize that? Yeah, everyone just including the UK and France also need to be included. I didn't realize Kiribati control 33 different islands. Only 20 of them are inhabited, though. And a big old thanks to my patrons. I stole Drew Durnil's Robux and won't return them until he plays Cartwright into Drew Durnil.
Alexander
Drew's
the
Argentinian Grandpa.
I'm back, boys.
aPhatNarwhal.
Connor
I will literally revive
DOOCHBAGGINS.
Fredrik
doesn't realize Imperial Japan flag is the same as modern Japan.
NordTyrol,
Tambre,
the Mexican 760,
and ZaneyBoi.